Thank you. Well,
Good morning,
welcome
everybody.
everybody. This is sort of a last minute invitation to Cliff. Cliff is, as many of you know, has been involved with a lot of projects related to things that Meridian are important to Meridian, including a green stormwater infrastructure audit, and now he's a resilience and sustainability planner for the city of East Lansing. And I thought it would just be cool for him to visit. Doesn't have a planned um, presentation, but he's involved with a lot of cool things. And I just wondered, what are you excited about these days, Cliff? And what's on your mind? And um, do you have
Yeah,
any questions for us?
yeah, I guess I could just go over some of the projects we have in the docket right now. I actually have some presentations from other groups and I can throw some slides up at some point, but I don't know, does that sound good? Just kind of what we're working on?
That sounds great, and don't feel like you have to cover it all in a half hour. I know you've got to leave a little early for another meeting. But if you just whet our appetite a little bit, thank you so much for coming in at a moment's notice. And we do
Yeah,
want to leave a little time in case other people have updates and questions.
yeah. So I think the biggest thing I'm excited about, which is we're about halfway through a 3-year process of developing a wet weather resiliency plan. Um, Basically the idea is to figure out, you know, where and why urban flooding is occurring and identify like our future vulnerabilities. We know that the weather's changing, climate's changing. We know that we have infrastructure that we're putting in the ground that has like an 80-year life cycle. We want to make sure that what we're building today is equipped for tomorrow's storms and not today's. So we're going through this like $950,000 project. It's full of hydraulic modeling of the entire drainage network, um, down to like it's looking at both like the size of our existing pipe infrastructure, but also the surface mesh, they call it, basically the topography of the city, and determining, or with that tool, it's kind of like a digital sandbox where you can play around with interventions to that infrastructure and to identify like where those problem areas are and then what types of fixes are going to have what type of result. Um, I have some slides on that. I guess I'll just, from a previous presentation, I can throw that up just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Um, so, I mean, you guys are not far from us. You probably had some of the same experiences. This was all triggered by 2021. We had that big storm in August and then another one in September. That was just before I started working for the city. I was working at Tri-County still at that point. I started in December of that year, but it was pretty clear that residents were demanding some sort of action on that. So we went after a $600,000 Eagle grant for this. It's kind of funny because it's a coastal management office grant, but I really played the whole, we are part of the Grand River watershed. What happens here impacts our downstream neighbors, Grand Haven, Grand Rapids, and all that. So while most of the awardees were coastal, we were able to get 600 grand out of it. And the project ended up costing a lot more. So we're putting in quite a bit of our own money. It's probably going to end up around 950, I think, just under a million. But yeah, like I said, figuring out why and where urban flooding is occurring, identifying those existing and future vulnerabilities, and then determining an equitable and community-driven approach to stormwater management. So like what that really means is we're figuring out where the problems are, where problems are going to be in the future under a changing climate scenario, and then identifying under this project 8 separate capital improvement projects, like large scale kind of regional stormwater BMPs. Think of like a stormwater park or something that could be potential options for us to address those issues. Of course, this is going to tell us that we have a ton of problems and we need a gazillion dollars to fix it. This is going to be a long-term uh, issue, and it's not like the end of the plan is fixing anything. It's basically going to tell us the challenges that we have ahead, potential ways to address it, but that's just the beginning. Then we have to go ahead and start implementing those types of projects. Um, so how do I want to do this? So like another in the middle of this, it really kind of spiked the interest of the community. No one knew I was working on this until we had that big storm in July last year. We did have a climate meteorologist or hydrometeorologist do a study on that rain event to see just how intense it was. And here's kind of the story. It's written in military time, but you can see like just the intensity of that rainfall event that we had last year. And I'm assuming you guys had it bad as well. Um, you can see on the right here, these are like different reports of flooding and basement issues and overflows. But down here at the bottom, it really shows how intense it was in pretty isolated areas. There's the star right here as the epicenter of the storm, where we had 8 to 9 inches in about 12 hours. So that breaks the scale when we talk about like a 100-year rainfall event or a 1,000-year rainfall event. Um, that was in excess of a 1,000-year rainfall event. It's not too funny, but I still laugh about it. But the star, like dead set, is on one particular parcel, and it's my sister's house, so I had to make fun of her about that because she got it kind of bad, but um, yeah, I make fun of her
Did
about
you
that.
have anything to do with that, Cliff?
I did what I could to direct it that way because I just live a little bit to the west, and I didn't want it at my house. But yeah, when I talk about like the excess or like in excess of a 1,000-year storm, we talk about the 100-year, 1,000-year rain event, whatever. Um, that is a misconception. Typically, people think that it means that, okay, it happened once, it's not going to happen for another 100 years. It's not the way it works. It really translates to a 1% annual chance when you're talking about a 100-year storm in any given year. And the fact that it happened in 1 year or 1 month doesn't mean there's any more or less likelihood of it happening in any given year, any given month. And you can see those kind of statistical translations of what those rainfall events are referring to here. Like a 1,000-year rain event has 0.01% chance in any given year. But we know that climate change is shifting those probabilities, and what a 10-year, 100-year, 1,000-year rain event was in the past is not what it is now or will be moving forward. So a component of this project, which we're done with this part, is doing a changing climate conditions report. So basically, where is it? We looked at aggregate of different climate models. Our consultant did. It's like this these expert climatologists and hydrometeorologists. Um, and they translated that into what it would mean for us here. And it would be useful for you guys too, because obviously, you know, you're very close. But a lot of these global climate models, and you hear these statistical reports about what we project happening in the future are based on like the Midwest or the Great Lakes region. And we wanted to figure out like what's going to happen here in East Lansing based on our topography, based on our location within the state, the way that the weather typically moves around this area. And so what they also did was look at those climate models under different scenarios. One being a situation where the global community gets their act together and hits emissions targets. We know that's probably not the most likely um, outcome. So we also looked at a situation where emissions carry on unabated, just reckless, high emission scenario globally, and then identified like the changing local conditions under both of those scenarios. And we looked at that through the end of century. So right now, it's 2025. We have about a 75, 85 year life cycle expectation for our underground stormwater infrastructure. So if we're putting something in the ground today, we want to make sure it's sized for the storms that it's going to experience over its lifetime. And that's about the end of century. And what they identified was about a 20% increase in rainfall volume on top of the 30% increase we've already seen since the mid 70s. And they also included a historical analysis of our typical storms as far as the like firm concrete record goes back, which is 1949. Um, with like more modern scientific measuring. Um, and so when we build our own infrastructure, or we compel developers to build projects and manage their stormwater, we tell them, hey, you have to manage it for the 100-year rain event, the 24-hour 100-year storm, or the 10-year, 2-year, all that kind of stuff. So there's like these measurements in the table that NOAA produces and some other sources produce, but they're typically backwards looking, basing their predictions on what has happened. And we want to focus on what is going to happen, or what we, can estimate with the best guess is going to happen. And so when I'm talking about these tables, this is an example of what our consultant developed for us. So there's different like 15-year periods, like so 2035, 2050, there's 2065, all the way up to the year 2100. And this SSP2-45 versus 8.5, those are the different climate scenarios, or the emission scenarios. And so they gave us options of like what we want to change our standards to, and like what the rainfall volume would equate to. In the real world, what this means is if we tell a developer they need to build to the 10-year, 24-hour storm, that means there's about a 20% under the high climate emission scenario. It means they have to like account for 20% more water than under like the most broadly accepted frequency intervals that exist out there through more like national sources like NOAA and this other one called Huff and Angel. So it's just giving us a better benchmark for our engineers to design to, and for us to compel other engineers to design to when somebody's building, like, let's just say they're building a Walmart and has a huge parking lot. They're going to have to assume that there's way more runoff coming off of that than they typically would, or even that we're experiencing even more runoff than we're experiencing now under the existing climate change that we've already experienced. But building for what we anticipate happening in 75 years. Let me see. So this is kind of like a picture of what these models look like that are super advanced. It's not like a widget where you can go in and tweak it and say, okay, what if we did this here? Like upsize this pipe, or put in a large rain garden biosystem here. These are the types of systems that, it's like a supercomputer that has to run overnight and costs $10,000 every time you run a token on it. But you can kind of see like what we're hoping to achieve here. It's the legend is pretty tough to read, but it shows you like the extent of flooding to be anticipated under different levels of, or different volumes, like the 5-year, 10-year, 25-year, 50-year storm, and then the volume of rainfall that we'd expect in each one of those, and down to the parcel level, be able to see who's vulnerable. And so this is a situation where we really need community engagement. So when we talk about what's acceptable in terms of risk, we're not deciding that for the community. We're doing a large scale like focus group effort, community engagement effort, to understand what people are comfortable with, and then what types of tweaks we could make, not in just in terms of infrastructure, but in levels of service. So typically around the country, roads are built to a 10-year rain event. That means that you wouldn't expect surface flooding for the volume of a 10-year storm and below. But it probably doesn't need to be so rigid spatially across the city. Like there are areas where, we're probably happy, or the community may be okay flooding their street as long as it's not more than 6 inches, so the fire truck can still get down there, or flooding park infrastructure, which can recover much faster if it means that structures will be safe. Like saying, we're going to build this road to a 25-year, expecting it's going to flood more, but it means it's going to protect the homes downstream of it, because we're not sending that water faster into the downstream watershed or sewer shed. Those are all decisions that we haven't gotten to yet. We're still finalizing the development of the model, but that's kind of what we're anticipating. And then we'll identify different projects in those hotspot areas and rate them on a what do we call it? Multi-criteria decision matrix that will factor in, how many people it helps, the property value protected, the ecological value, like environmental justice. Basically, everything will be weighted based on what the community had identified, and then weigh these potential projects for elevating within our CIP process, like our capital improvement planning. Um, so it's not just the loudest voices or the richest neighborhoods getting addressed first. And just for some visuals, like these are kind of the types of projects that we're, thinking are likely to be proposed. Those bigger stormwater park type of issues or initiatives. Nothing quite on the scale probably of like Montgomery Drain, but kind of the same vibe. And like we can picture like our Hannah Community Center. There's that big soccer field in front of it, but that's a pretty hot spot area. It gets a lot of flooding, and homes are impacted over there. So underground detention under those fields is probably a potential for us. The benefit of being underground is you have a lot of storage, and people don't know about it. You can still maintain that land use. Again, these are all super expensive things. Nothing's probably going to be happening very soon, but we're going to be equipped with the information to help us identify what types of options exist for us and what makes sense based on um, the actual experienced, like how water actually flows through the city. And we'll know it down to the parcel level. I'm kind of scared because the last model that I saw didn't have great news for my house next to the Harrison Meadows wetland there, but you can't do anything about it if you don't know about it. So that's our big exciting project. I have some others, but are there any initial questions just off that?
Well, Cliff, I'm wondering, how much, I'm sure it's a mix, but I'm kind of thinking that obviously there's the things the city can do to its infrastructure, like you just gave a good example. And then there's things you can require for new developments. And I guess there's things you could encourage homeowners or building owners to do, rain gardens or whatever. And is that all in the mix, or is there something that's really kind of the focus of how to deal with these kind of future problems? Is it more, kind of making the city infrastructure better, or is it maybe education of what residents can do? Or
Yeah, it's all in play. When we have a in excess of 1,000-year storm like we did, 9 inches, anything that a homeowner does or even a developer, I mean, like, yeah, things impact and compound. But that kind of rain event, like those smaller things you can do aren't really going to be a ton of help. They're going to help you with smaller storms. They're going to improve water quality and quantity for the majority of the time. But these larger scale kind of regional BMPs are more so the solution for those large events. But everything compounds. So while this is focused on public infrastructure, we have an offshoot, and we've been meeting with this committee of different commissions over the last 6 months. And we've come up with a plan that's going to council probably next month, to adopt or to take this climate data and reference it in what we compel developers to do. But we're also shrinking our threshold for initiating the stormwater regulatory program requirements. So we're creating something that we're referring to as the small site policy. In reality, what this means is like anyone who's doing a land disturbance of 1,000 square feet or more is going to be on the hook for managing the excess stormwater. For MS4s, you guys are an MS4 Meridian, but it's only limited to your township properties. So most of this is handled by the drain office. The regulatory requirement or the threshold is land disturbances of 1 acre or more, which is the same statewide, basically nationwide. There's some outliers here and there. But our small site policy is going to really shrink that down into, a business is putting a new patio in, and it's going to be 1,000 new square foot of impervious we're going to make them do something to manage that stormwater. Continuing to educate people. We're in the middle of updating our nuisance law ordinance to expressly permit or allow rain gardens, native plants, all that kind of stuff. Because right now there's some ambiguity in the language. We promote it through policy resolutions and all that, but it's tough for our enforcement team, our ordinance enforcement personnel, to kind of balance these community goals that exist with the way the ordinance is written. So it's a full court press for sure. But with this project, it's more intended to like take those very large scale infrastructure based problems and identify solutions, but it's definitely not the end of the story.
This is fascinating work, Cliff. And it's all resonating with what you're saying. If you don't turn it into teeth, it's just, you know, pretty please developer, will you do this? And it's awesome. I'd love to see this at like a planning conference, because I don't think planners are quite grasping what you're saying. You're absolutely right. If the word you keep using is planning, but we keep talking about the current 100-year storm. And this modeling that you've done it's incredible. It's eye-opening. And one of the things I think was fascinating from it was a little factoid you had in there. Even if globally we meet our target, and we're certainly not going to do that in the next 3 years in this country, we're still looking at an 8% increase in the next 100 years in our rainfall. Like, this is gonna get worse, you know? This is fascinating work, and I really applaud it.
Yeah, thank you. And the one good thing about this, I mean, there's many good things about it, but all this climate data is useful to everyone in the region. Like, I've been trying to really promote this through the GLRC, the Greater Lansing Regional Committee for Stormwater Management. But there's like no reason for our climate study to not be useful for you guys. Like, they did focus on the boundaries of East Lansing, but like,
Yeah.
it's going to be the same or roughly the same. You're going to have different issues because like your land use is a little bit different. You have more land and all that stuff. So I'm not saying like the outcomes are necessarily the same. But in terms of like the storms that are coming through and the level of intensity of those storms and what we get, you
Yeah.
largely
It's interesting too, and you made a reference to this, like a lot of our development, when stormwater ends up being not under our jurisdiction the same way it is in the city of Lansing. It goes through the county drain commission. I think they have a recognition that this is going on, but they haven't updated their standards to it. And this has created a huge tug of war on a couple projects where developers come in and said, okay, drain commission, we've met your regulatory requirements. And the drain commission said, yeah, but we want more. And they're saying, well, where's your standard for that? And they say, well, it's not a standard, but we want more. And so that has created like some real tension, because they've gone so far as to withhold approvals. And what are you going to do about that? Like, we don't have that, we don't have a dog in that fight, except it's holding up our approval process because we can't approve a site plan until they approve it. And they're saying, well, we're not going to approve it then until you meet our arbitrary standard. And that's the word that's being used by the developers. It's a mess right now.
At least I know I met with Paul on Monday, Paul Pratt, the deputy drain commissioner. And I thought he said September or October, their new standards are being published. So they're in the middle of updating them and it's supposed to come soon. I don't know like what all their standards that they're publishing, if it's, volume estimations or whatever, or if it's just like their design standards, but I know something's coming. He just updated the GLRC at our Monday meeting.
That is really good news. And I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Say, Cliff, along that same line of thought, I think going back maybe even 20 years, when I was working on with this kind of stuff in Wayne County, they were putting out really stringent standards about, like zero runoff, and you had to just, in order to do anything, you had to keep all your runoff on site. And now things obviously have changed so much with climate change. And I don't know if they've updated their standards or not, but even if you do update your standards based on your modeling, is that going to actually keep runoff on site regardless of the rain event? Is it, or are we still looking at, this chance of flood?
Definitely still going to have a chance of flood. Like what
Yeah.
I try to tell our residents is like, you can't build for everything. There's always going to be a bigger storm. There's always going to be that risk out there. And there's limits to what is, engineering, like feasible for engineering and feasible for municipal budgets. So the best that we can do is identify our best middle ground, but then also making sure like what we can control is like, or we have a greater level of control of where that runoff goes if it is created and leaves. So that's when I was talking about like, there's so much storage available on our streets. No one wants flooded streets, but maybe we need to reframe what we think about as a problem. If my street is flooded for 30 minutes after a big intense storm, but it didn't get into my structure or do any damage, maybe that's not a problem worth fixing in terms of like when you think about how much money and how much engineering, if it's even possible to do so. But finding out like where that middle ground is, like if vehicles and emergency vehicles can still access these areas and like our thoroughfares to the fire department and the hospital are open, and in exchange for that, our smaller low traffic streets have a 15 to 30 minute period of low level flooding, maybe that's okay. But that's not up for me to decide. That's part of our community conversation we're going to have. But you think about like how much volume storage is available there. So I think part of this is going to be reframing how we think about what is an issue. Granted, like for these, typical summer rain events, you don't want your road flooding, but if we're getting 9 inches of rain over a 12-hour period, it's like biblical. And something's going to have to give. So that's how I look at it. And one thing I didn't show this slide, but I will, and this is always pretty impactful for our residents. After that July flood, I drew this on a napkin and made our graphics team get it out really quick. But like we had a lot of people saying, well, there's so much flooding. I never had the issue before, and my drain out in front is not draining. Like somebody turned off the drainage infrastructure. We had that all over Facebook. That's not real. These are passive systems. But we're so close to the river here, just like you guys. It's not always about the size of the infrastructure. We have people saying, well, I need more drains at my house. I need a larger drain so more water can go away. The problem we had in July is that the hydraulic grade line from the river popped up above the surface. So you can see here, like, it doesn't matter if you add more inputs or more drains, there's nowhere for it to go in a situation like that. That's why intensity really matters, because it all hits at once, and it's not just about what we do, it's about the larger watershed and the receiving waters that are a part of that watershed. I don't know if it probably is kind of getting off topic from your exact question there, but I think what at large, or I mean, kind of in a textbook example, yeah, sometimes there's just nowhere else for the water to go. But if we can kind of influence where it does go when it comes to the surface, we're better off. And those are decisions that a community can make. And it's a component of this project is figuring out, okay, in these situations where we can't get rid of it immediately and you're going to have surface flooding, where is it acceptable? At what level is it acceptable? And how can we protect structures, people, emergency services in those situations?
Just
Hey,
looking
Cliff,
at
are
the
there any
diagram,
areas that, are there any areas where, you know, existing homes or buildings are that, you know, they shouldn't be there? And that maybe there's a policy to, encourage them to, you know, just knock it down and move on?
I think that that is going to be a part of our strategy. Is it's going to be cheaper to buy homes and knock them down than to spend millions of dollars to address a single parcel issue. And those are that's not something that'd be really widespread, I don't think, but I can think of examples of homes that are built below the grade of the road, which probably should have never happened, but you know, it's been there for 90 years. And of course, if your drainage infrastructure is oriented towards the road and that's where your drains are, and your driveway goes this way down, like you're just creating a ramp for it. And so if that's the only problem on that street, granted, it's a very big problem for that person. Is everyone better off if the city just buys that and turns it into a small bioswale or something? Versus spending millions of dollars on infrastructure improvements to keep an area dry that, you know, there's always going to be a bigger storm that's going to surpass that. So there's those isolated examples around town where, yeah, there's houses that probably shouldn't be there, and I think that's got to be in play. Yeah, that's what I've always is Sean. That's what I've always said to people is like, water's always going to win. Gravity's going to win here. If you're downhill, you're on the sore end of it, and it sucks if you bought that house, and don't want to make light of the situations that people are in. But I think that that's where the community, you know, municipal budgets can come in and more efficiently address an isolated issue like that by buying it and putting it to good use versus, you know, continuing to have the house there.
Is this, Cliff, is this, what you're coming up with all this data and stuff, going to, like your floodplain in terms of when people buy a house and their insurance and that kind of thing, is this going to be able to be put into that place as well is it all this data? I don't know, is that even something that the city deals with in terms of like what the floodplain is for when people are buying, or is that even city, or is that just like the fact that the data is out there?
I have wondered that myself, like if you are an at-risk parcel and the insurance company identified it or, you know, became aware of this, like how they would, you know, if they would consider that data. But we do have other models now, like for our combined sewer area, something very similar to this. Granted, we're like redoing it as this one holistic drainage network, but we haven't seen that with our existing models that show very similar data. Like we have a pretty good idea which houses are most likely to have basement backups of sewage and stuff like that. So it's not currently being used that way.
Okay.
I, as a resident myself, am very like it worries me a little bit, but also like it's not. I don't see it as a reason to not identify our problems just because of what insurance might do with it. Plus, I imagine that they just focus on like the FEMA maps and like large scale national models, and probably, you know, these are all estimates that we're doing as a local community. I imagine that they probably don't hold a lot of weight to it.
Okay, well, that answers my question then. So like what you're coming up with and what you're looking at isn't going to necessarily affect some parcels insurance or anything. Okay, that was kind of my question. Okay, thank you. Go
Ken,
ahead,
you have
Ken.
a question?
Go ahead, Kim. Okay, never mind. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. I had to
So-
unmute myself, sorry.
That's all right.
Just to clarify for myself, do you work then in conjunction with the drain commissioner? Or do you guys, or is this something separate from what he's doing? How does that
Yeah, this is separate.
coordinate?
So there's some involvement with the drain office in the city because they operate and maintain county drains within our boundaries, but we also have some of our own drains. But we're a lot different than a township in terms of the stormwater regulatory program because we own the roads and we own the infrastructure underground. So we are responsible for the standards and the, not only building them, but, influencing how developers engage with them. So when you think about a new development coming in, that water is coming into the public drainage network. And so we have to regulate, that input, so to speak. So that's our responsibility because it's coming into our infrastructure and onto our roads and into our drains. For a township, the road commission at the county manages your roads. The drain office manages your drains. In terms of the stormwater regulatory program and where you have influence strictly is on township properties. So some of this stuff is just not, you have less, points of influence than a city or a county would. I would say that Meridian is lucky because, our drain office is super progressive and, that's not the case around the state. So I think that, you don't have those, you don't have your hands on the controls, but you have somebody good with their hands on the controls. But yeah, this is separate from the drain office. We're keeping them updated on it, just like we are all of our neighbors and partners, because it's useful to all of us. But there's small examples in the city where they are the regulatory authority. So like over by Costco, you can see that there's like a new marijuana store and there's some development across the street that's coming.
Yeah.
That is in the city of East Lansing. But in terms of stormwater, that runoff goes to the Heritage Hill Drain, which is running along the north side of Hazlitt Road. So since it goes into their infrastructure and not ours, they're the ones who are regulating what they do around stormwater. We can influence it from the site plan component and say, hey, we want to see, a rain garden, we want to see this and that. But in terms of like meeting that state and Clean Water Act regulatory standard, that is their responsibility. And we have less influence because it's their infrastructure that's being impacted versus ours. So there's those examples where even in Clinton County, because like where my office is, I'm in Clinton County. So there's examples for them too. But largely, like if you're downtown or in our most residential areas, it's us.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize there was, such a big difference between, a township and the city requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Cliff, I know you've got a short time. I don't want you to leave any sooner than you have to, but I do have
to leave pretty soon, but I can go over. I have a couple other projects I can share, just like broadly, if it's interesting.
If you're up for that, or I was also going to ask, are you okay if we have additional questions, maybe have another chat with you or field some additional questions sometime? People have it?
Yeah.
Great.
That works.
This has been really interesting. Thank you so much. And if you've got a couple more things you want to share.
Yeah, I would just say we have some other grant programs that are kind of starting to kick off or finalize. So our DPW drop off for recycling up here, we take a lot of trips to the MRF, the material recovery facility, something around 80 to 90 a month. And often that's with loose cardboard and just like 200, 300 pounds, which is very inefficient. A lot of emissions associated with very little material transfer. So we're about to install some compactors so we can do about 10,000 pounds per load. And as part of that grant, we also got a truck to haul those larger containers, and we added a styrofoam densifier. So we're recycling polystyrene, but basically you have to ship air down the road because it's 98% air. So this new machine is shrinking it down 98%. And we're taking what used to be an entire tractor trailer, 18-wheeler full, and putting it on one pallet, and we can just like stuff it in the corner, and we can sell it to turn it into, I don't have one handy, but like crown molding and picture frames. So it's something can get like 26 cents a pound for. So that's exciting. And we also just got a grant from DNR for a downtown tree revitalization plan. So we're going to be doing some visioning sessions with the community to identify like what they want to see in their downtown in terms of a tree canopy. But then also create a actual roadmap to get there, identifying like the soil volumes, soil amendments, vandalism deterrents, all those types of things that could address some of those issues that we have with, developers just sticking a tree in the ground and, there being poor soils, the thing dying, and then no one being responsible for it moving on. One of the problems with our downtown is that the tree canopy is a result of isolated development decisions, where the landscaping standards say you have to have 2 trees per 40 foot of frontage. What we want to do is create a roadmap specifically identifying species, planter style, like planter boxes versus in-ground grates, all that stuff specifically for spots, and then be able to either plan our capital improvement projects around those and say, hey, we're going to do these few this year because it's really expensive because it's like concrete and all that. Or when developers come in, basically compel them to follow that plan. So rather than just saying, hey, stick 2 deciduous trees in the ground for every 40 foot of frontage, but actually give them, though, this is what we want to help realize the vision that the community has. So we're going to be working with a consultant on that. We've also really upped our planting program in the past couple of years. We're using G Farms. We used to plant like 40 to 50 trees a year, but we're up to about 300 now. And we're also experimenting with Missouri gravel bed to see if we can get even more trees for cheap. So we're buying bare root trees in the spring when they're cheap and dormant. The problem with those is usually to get them in the ground very quickly because they're bare root. But we're sticking them in a gravel bed, summering them on irrigation and letting a very like fine root mass develop and their leaf out. And then in the fall at our kind of leisure, we'll be able to plant them. But basically we're getting these huge, really nice, very well-rooted trees for about like $40 a piece. And we're able to store them in an area that's like 10 by 6 for like 50 trees. I think I talked to one of your interns over there, maybe it was Emma, about having you guys come and check it out. But it's our first year doing it. We're really excited because it's working out very well, and the roots are growing very well. So they should be more resilient for our urban soils. We're planning on doing an update to our 2012 climate plan this year, I hope. We're also hoping to squeeze in our large scale solar array at DPW. I think we have until the end of the year because the tax advantages are changing with the big beautiful bill. So the whole 10-year window is shrinking to about another 5 months. Yeah, we got a lot of cool stuff going on, and I can talk about it more in detail at another time, but those are the things I'm most excited about.
Where'd you say you're getting the deal on the trees for the?
We got these ones from Robinson. I think they're actually in New York, but we talked to the Greening of Detroit about where they get their bare root trees, and that's where they get them. And they were doing a huge shipment to Michigan, I think to Detroit already. So they just had a truck stop here as well. So they didn't even charge us for freight, I don't think. But yeah, they're huge. Like I plant bare root trees at my house. Like I got a bunch of fruit trees and stuff, and I'm used to them being, like 3/4 of an inch or ½ inch. Some of the roots on these things, like the root flare was like that big. I mean, they're huge, and they're 8-10 feet tall. Swamp white oaks and a bunch of other ones. But bare root trees, they really chop up their roots to get them ready for packaging. I should show you. I gotta leave here in probably like 3 minutes, but I'll show you like the reason behind these things.
Did you also mention G Farms?
Yeah, so they're our planting contractor now.
Oh, I see. Okay. Is that Stockbridge?
Yep.
Yep.
So here's an example of like what the tree looks like going in. And then after it has time in this irrigated bed, all the fine root mass develops. And so we're able to plant it at a time that works better for us because we don't have the staffing to run around and just like immediately deal with 50 bare root trees because they're pretty sensitive. So it gives us more time to deal with it, but also it's hitting the ground at a better time of year where it doesn't, it's got fall, it's wet, and it's not so hot, but it's also got all this root system. And yeah, we paid like $30 or $40 a piece for these things, and they're huge. So we're pumped.
Well, this has been fascinating and inspiring, and it's been too long since we've caught up, but hope you'll come back, Cliff, and
Yeah.
encourage if people have additional questions they think of, to throw them out there, and could send out an email to everyone. Thank you so much, Cliff. And where are you off to now?
Western. So I'm the chair of the Michigan Water Environment Association Stormwater Committee, and we organized a field trip for like one in-person meeting. So we got like 20 something people, kind of like stormwater managers from around the state, meeting. And apparently they've been doing a ton of stormwater BMPs, like some large scale features at Western. And so we have someone with their facilities team showing us around and talking us through what they got going. So I don't know too much about exactly what I'll see yet, but I gotta leave because I'm the lunch courier, so I gotta stop at Jimmy John's before this thing starts.
It's raining. You get to see it in real time. Travel
Yeah.
safe, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
So
thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Bye.
All right.